The wind curled off the wall like a living thing, slithering beneath Jon Snow's furs and nipping at the scar on his neck. Dawn spilled over the frosted world east of the great ice rampart, painting the horizon with a faint ache of rose and gold that could not warm him. Somewhere below, Ghost padded along the crunchy drift, crimson eyes fixed on the tree line of the haunted forest. The direwolf's breath fumed white in the half-light. But he made no sound, as if the morning itself required reverence. Jon stood atop the outer stairs, black cloak snapping, and tried to breathe through the tightness in his chest. Castle Black was rousing. Iron-shod boots rang on walkways. Recruits cursed. The cold kettle drums of the dining hall echoed. Yet all of it felt distant, an echo and some echo of a life he might once have belonged to. He had offered his sword to the Night's Watch, and then to Winterfell, to the Realm, to Daenerys, to every haunting cause that had demanded it in turn. And each time he had paid, coin, or blood, or love. Now there were no vows left unbroken, no debts unclaimed. He was bone-weary of banners and names. South of the wall, they whispered of him: Kinslayer, Queenslayer, Oathbreaker, Hero. The names blurred until they meant nothing. In the shadow of the wall, only one identity clung to him with any certainty: exile. Exile from the memory of his brothers, from the crown never wanted, from the carcass of duty. But there, beyond the trees, stretched a land without lords, without keeps, without songs of dragons and thrones. Continent of silence and snow. Mance Rayder had once called it freedom. Long hours he had stood vigil these past moons, studying the vague, rolling dunes of white that disappeared into the horizon, thinking not of escape but of absolution. Each dawn the thought crystallized stronger. South or north, the ghosts would follow. Yet perhaps, in the place where the realm ended, the dead might speak more softly, or he at least might listen better. Steps scuffed behind him. Tormund Giantsbane emerged onto the stairway, beard crackling with frost, a ragged bearskin thrown about his shoulders. He carried the smell of pine and wood smoke, and the off-key laughter of wildlings who never apologized for living. Beside him trotted the shaggy gray-brown form of Longtooth, ears pricked toward Ghost below. "Told you the wall's tits are colder than a dead fish," Tormund growled, squinting down the stair at Jon. "You planning to freeze your stones off altogether, Crow?" Jon flexed fingers that were stiff even inside duskin gloves, only making certain they're still there. Tormund barked a laugh. "There's my miserable kinslayer. Come, the men are ready. Another day's march. Your folk would have mucked it up with orders and horns. But us? We eat, we piss, we go. Me." Jon did not move. His gaze remained on the horizon. "Are they yours now?" Tormund's smile fell. "Free folk follow no one long. But they'll listen to me a spell. Enough to see you safe among them." Jon considered that. Safe, an odd hope. Beyond the wall, safety was a campfire ringed by watchful eyes. A blade never quite sheathed, but it was also the wildling's fierce loyalty to life, unbound by claims of lordship. He had tasted that freedom once and lost it. Perhaps this time might be to listen to you instead, Tormund said softly. Jon turned, hair whipping across his brow. "I have no desire to lead. Funny thing, desire." The raider's iron-ringed fingers drummed against the haft of his axe. "It's the folk who don't want crowns that the snow gods keep shoving crowns at. Mance never begged for songs either, yet he ruled. You carry the same look in your eye. Man who's seen too much and still keeps walking." Jon's throat tightened around a protest he could not quite utter. The Night King's icy gaze, Daenerys' final exhalation, Bran's distant benediction. Images blurred one atop another like a palimpsest of guilt. He rubbed the heel of his palm against the scar on his chest where Longclaw's pommel once rested. "If they obey me, it should be because they wish it," he managed. "Not because Some tale precedes me. Tormund shrugged. They'll follow strength that does not flinch. You may be sick of steel and titles, but you know the wild better than most Southron pups ever will. Jon exhaled, the breath sharp. Tell them I will walk with them, not ahead. The giant grinned. Words like that, Crow. You'll have them eating from your palms. Come then. The sun's near up, and the snow turns to slush by midday. They descended the narrow stair in silence, the world humming with the low creak of ancient ice. Ghost looked up as Jon's boots hit the crunchy yard. The dire wolf loped forward to butt his skull beneath Jon's fingers, pressing warmth into frozen knuckles. Jon scratched the thick white ruff, drawing comfort from the steady thud of the beast's heart. Beyond the gatehouse, the free folk assembled in the wide expanse, where barrels of tar and broken siege engines lay half-buried in snowdrifts. Several hundred souls, women with carved-bone charms, men in patchwork, furs top-stitched with sinew, children perched on sledges behind shaggy dog mastiffs. A few former watch brothers, black cloaks dyed brown, mingled among them. His own recruits from years ago who had chosen the wild over the ruin of the order. They called greetings, fists pressed to chests in silent salute. Jon caught the eyes of Val, the princess of the free folk, golden hair braided with crow feathers. She inclined her chin, assessing him openly. Her people had lost Mance, then her sister Dalla. They guarded grief beneath stoic brows, but she had also lost more than most the long night and yet refused to spare. A mirror, uncomfortably bright to his own threats of collapse. He lifted a hand, simple acknowledgement, and stepped toward the iron-bound tunnel that pierced the wall's thickness. Cranes groaned as the inner gate rolled aside. Snow dust drifted in the dim shaft, swirling in lantern light like scattered bone hash. Jon hesitated, glancing back once at the crenellations where black-cloaked shapes lingered. Brothers who remained to keep the watch's vigil, such as it was. They would record his passage in the logs. Lord Snow departed with wildlings, no certainty of return. The World of Thrones would read it and shrug, its appetite for stories already bloated. He inhaled the chill smelling of old ice and pine sap. Then he crossed the threshold. Inside the tunnel, each step echoed. Ghosts' claws clicked. Memories flashed, dragons shrieking overhead, night turning to pale ruin as blue fire carved through stone. He steadied his breathing, counting the thump of his own heartbeat, letting the rhythm drown the noise of recollection. Behind him, sledges scraped. The free folk muttered, somewhere a babe fussed. It took near a quarter hour to emerge into open daylight again. When the outer gate parted, they spilled onto virgin snow, glaring bright under risen sun. Jon lifted a gloved hand to shade his eyes. Miles of rolling hills glittered. The tree line, thick with sentinel pines, seemed to beckon like the columns of a vast cathedral. Beyond that lay the frost fangs, the hidden valleys where mammoths trudged and giants mourned their dead. The ice lakes and the stone villages older than any maester's chronicle. It was into that unknown he would ride. Tormund stomped past, hefting bundles onto a sledge. "We make camp at Milkwater by dusk," he announced. "Keep your little ones wrapped and your blades free. Drifts are deep and shadows deeper." As the column began its slow advance, Jon found himself walking at Val's shoulder. She studied him. "You carry ghosts, Crow." "I carry their weight," he answered. "The ghosts walk themselves." She tilted her head. "Then you know what must be done with weight. Set it down or let it sink you." He thought of setting it down, letting the memory of Daenerys slip like sand through fingers. The thought both soothed and terrified. "I'm trying," she echoed, rolling the Southron word across her tongue. In the land beyond, trying is cold comfort. You either survive, or you do not. You either lead, or you vanish. Jon met her eyes. I'm done with thrones. Good. Beyond the wall, there are no thrones. Her gaze lingered. But there is song, and song needs a voice. He said nothing. Words had always been his ally, but now they tasted of promises shattered. Still, he walked. Hours wore on. Sun climbed higher, turning the vast snowscape to blinding shards. The column moved in ragged line, scouts on snowshoes flanking either side, hunters ranging ahead, mothers guiding reindeer-drawn sledges. Tormund trudged near the front, bellowing at stragglers, swapping bawdy jokes, exuding an undimmed zeal for simply being alive no matter winter's breath. JON kept pace just behind the vanguard, eyes ever scanning. Ghost patrolled outward arcs, occasionally returning with muzzle dusted white, tail low. Nothing threatening yet. By noon they paused in a hollow where wind had piled snow into shielding dunes. Fires flickered, melting hollows into crystalline bowls. JON shared a strip of salted goat with a boy whose nose dripped onto his lip. The child spoke no common tongue, but grinned around each chew. In the quiet, JON listened to the wildling's Murish cadences, the guttural old tongue sprinkled like stones in a stream. So much of the Norse blood had flowed unseen past Maester ink, but here it thrummed vibrant, unstoppable. After the meal, Val approached, carrying a brittle branch adorned with crow feathers bound by frayed sinew. She thrust it out. A gift from the children you saved at Hardhome. JON touched the feathers. They were black shot with iridescent green, raven, not crow. I remember their faces, but not their names. Names are wind, she said. Deeds remain. Keep it. He slid the branch through the loop of his belt. A token, yes, but also an anchor. Proof that once, amidst chaos, he had forged rescue from despair. Perhaps he could do it again, if not for the realm then, for this ragged people who refused subjugation. They broke camp. A noon lengthened, shadows creeping like ink fractures. A hush settled as they neared the milkwater. The river was little more than a sluggish vein beneath lacquered ice, but in thaw it burst wild, churning milk-hued with glacial silt, hence its name. Mammoth carcass bones jutted near one bank, worn smooth by time. They chose the opposite side to make camp, pitching hide tents between clusters of boulders. Smoke curled into a sky now bruising toward violet. JON helped dig a latrine trench, shoulders burning, grateful for menial toil devoid of politics. When twilight settled, he sat by a small fire with Tormund, Val, and a few other elders. The flames licked snow melt from antler racks set as supports, casting molting shadows. Meat crackled, hare or squirrel, hard to tell. They passed a skin of sour goat milk that burned the throat. One elder, stooped and blind in one eye, tapped JON's wrist. You dream, Crow. JON hesitated. Sometimes. Dreams are roads. They tell you where the bones lie. The old man's remaining eye gleamed silver. Do your dreams speak of crowns? JON saw a throne of ice, razor shards, a woman's silhouette burned to ash. He swallowed. They speak of nothing I care to wear. The elder nodded, as though he heard the unsaid. Then let others name you king. What you call yourself matters less than what you do. Night deepened. Stars pricked the sable dome, brighter than anywhere south. JON lay in a fur cocoon. Ghost curled at his back, listening to distant howls that might be wolves or something more ancient. The wind carried scents of pine, smoke, and river race. Behind closed lids, visions swam, ran perched in the roots of a weirwood. Arya's grin as keen as needle's edge, Sam's earnest eyes above stacks of moldering parchment. They receded like boats slipping into fog. A softer vision took shape, a campfire ringed by free folk. Their faces turned expectantly toward him, as he recited some tale of old first men bargains, language lilting and strong. He felt their attention settle like cloaks upon his shoulders, heavy yet strangely comforting. He woke with a jolt, heart thudding. The night remained silent save for crackling embers. The next day, they continued upriver, climbing slopes where drifts swallowed knees. Sledge dogs sank to bellies, barking frustration. Jon hacked footholds into slick ridges for children to follow, each swing of his axe echoing in the frigid air. His muscles complained. He welcomed the ache. Mid-morning, scouts reported fresh tracks, big as shields, splaying claw marks. Bare, but not recently fed. Tormund led a detachment to drive it off. Jon accompanied, ghost bounding ahead. In the hush of snow-blanketed spruce, they found the beast drinking from a fissure in the iced river. It was white-furred, scarred with old wounds, its breath steaming like forge smoke. Jon watched as the party spread, spears leveled. The bear raised its head, black eyes reflecting gray cloud. For a moment, predator and men regarded one another with a solemnity beyond words. Then the bear lumbered away, uninterested. The hunters did not follow. They were low on arrows. Live and let live. That evening, Tormund clapped Jon's shoulder. You see how they look to you for the nod, Crow. I gave none. Yet they waited for it. The giant's smile was almost sad. Much as you fight it, you're shaping their path. Jon crouched to feed kindle into a fledgling fire. Sparks danced. If I shape it, let it be toward peace. Tormund scratched his beard. Peace is a lodging with thin walls. War's always out there listening. Jon poked the embers. Then we will keep the fire between us and the night. Days blurred into ritual. Break camp, march, hunt, recount old tales beneath cold moons. Jon learned how to feel the snow's message underfoot, where it crusted over hidden water, where it lodged in drifts concealing pitfalls. He listened to Val teach children to whistle warnings that carried farther than any horn. Sometimes he sat with the old blind man who spoke to birch bark, claiming the trees kept secrets of earlier winters. Slowly, Jon's breaths grew deeper, the raw edge in his mind smoothing like stone beneath river flow. One afternoon, at a narrow pass, they encountered another tribe moving south. The Thens, bronze-armored remnants with scarification along cheeks. Their Magnar fell during the long night. Their new leader, a woman named Raga, eyed Jon with suspicion. "The crow returns," she said in accented common. "Last we met, you wore a black coat and bound us in chains." Jon inclined his head. "Last we met, the dead walked." He unstrapped Longclaw, a blade she recognized, and offered it hilt first. "I come not to bind, but to share fire." Raga's gaze lingered on the direwolf at his side, the wolf who had once pulled her lieutenant from a white's grasp. At last she accepted the sword, inspected the rippled Valerian steel, then returned it. "Fire is scarce, but we will hear your words." That night, both tribes ringed a massive bonfire where the pass widened into basin. Sparks climbed like bright souls. Jon addressed them, voice steady, speaking of roads beyond the frost fangs that led to valley springs and Gamurish plains. He spoke of founding a hole at the edge of those plains, where clans might gather each moon to trade, marry, and counsel, to resolve feuds without blood. A moot, he called it, recalling old northern assemblies. He offered no law, save the vow that all free folk attending would be safe from blade or spear within the hall's circle. The Thens murmured. Some scoffed, old grudges ran deep, but Raga eyed Jon the way a smith eyes promising ore. "You would build a hall," she said, "with what timber and whose sweat?" "Ours," Jon replied. "Together." He turned, gesturing to the wildlings behind him. "We have axes, hands, and the will to live unchained." Raga's expression softened not quite to a smile. "A bold dream, Crow. Dreams begin with firewood, he answered. An elder beat her drum. The thens discussed among themselves, strange syllables rattling like stones. At length, Raga lifted a hand. When the snows melt, we will send 300 to your hall, steel for roof timbers, labor from our strongest. But the moot must allow duel by spear for honor grudges. Jon glanced at Val and Tormund. They nodded. If both sides consent, Jon agreed. Cheers erupted, gruff but genuine. The two tribes mingled, trading strips of dried lichen bread, horn knives, bronze brooches. Jon felt a quiet warmth bloom beneath his ribs, something stirring he had not allowed himself since Winterfell. Not hope, precisely. Possibility. Later, as the bonfire guttered, Val approached, shadows dancing across her cheekbones. You speak like a king. He met her eyes, saw reflection of ember sparks. I speak like a man who remembers the cost of silence. You speak, and they listen. See how the children mimic your stance. They weigh your every gesture. She stepped closer. Would you deny them that strength? Jon tasted the question, like ice melt on his tongue. Words slipped out low. I fear what comes of crowns. They burn good men. She brushed a snowflake from his beard. Then wear no crown. Walk among us crowned in your scars. She turned away, voice softer. The long night may be over, but shadows linger. We need stories that guide us. Be the man in those stories. Snow fell during the night, hush layer upon hush layer, quilting tents and muffling the wind. Jon dreamed of a weirwood root burrowing through ice until it found fertile black soil. Dawn broke pale, and he woke to Ghost's nose probing his cheek. Outside, children giggled, rolling snow boulders to build walls for some game of raider and crow. Jon stretched, joins creaking pleasantly. He stepped out, inhaling a lungful of air so cold it tasted sweet. The camp hummed with a tentative joy. He could almost imagine a hall rising there, log beams, smoke venting through a thatch gap, voices raised in laughter, not war cries. He pictured carving the direwolf sigil onto the doorpost, but smaller than the painted heart tree or mammoth tusk symbol. A hall of equals. Tormund trudged over, munching a chunk of raw bacon. Morning, your grace. He winked. Jon rolled his eyes. Call me that again and I'll have ghost piss in your ale. Ha! King's allowed to joke now, eh? Wildling's grin faded to something more thoughtful. They will call you Magnar of Magnars. Might as well prepare. Jon looked over the gathering. There was Raga instructing warriors, Val coaxing a shy toddler to taste acorn mash, the old blind man tracing sigils in snow. If they call, I can only answer. Answer well, Tormund said, clapping him on the back. As sun climbed, Jon convened a council. 4 elders, 2 spearwives, Raga, Tormund, Val. They huddled around a rough hide map scratched with charcoal. Discussion turned to site selection for the hall. Raga proposed a valley near the shivering forest. Good timber, stone wedges, hot springs that sometimes cracked the frost. Others argued for a perch overlooking the Skirling Pass for defense. Debate churned but remained civil, surprising Jon more than any threat of blades. Eventually he interjected, quiet authority carrying farther than a shout. We will survey both. The hall should be a place all clans reach without trespass. The hot springs may keep winter at bay longer, but a vantage over the pass guards against raiders from the shadowed shore. He met each pair of eyes. Let us not decide and talk alone. Walk the land. Feel its answer. They nodded, measuring him anew. Val's lips curved in approval. The old blind man raised his chin, as if scenting something pure. Over following weeks, the combined tribes traveled in smaller parties, scouting valleys. Jon joined each for a time, sleeping beneath stone outcroppings, crossing ice bridges that groaned over fathomless chasms. At night, they shared stories of the cannibal giants of the Frostfang Peaks, of manses' hidden songs, of an ice spider ghosting through moonlit woods. Jon recounted tales of stark ancestors, of Lyanna's laughter echoing in crypts, of Maester Aemon's regrets, his words braided with theirs, weaving a tapestry of history neither south nor beyond could claim alone. With each tale, he felt weight lighten, not vanish, but distribute among listeners until none bore it alone. He still woke to memories of dragonfire searing flesh, but daylight banished them sooner. One crisp morning, they reached a valley where steam coiled from fissures encrusted basalt. Snowmelt trickled into pools tinted turquoise. White birches ringed the basin, their trunks caught in perpetual whistle from geothermal breeze. Jon knelt, dipped a hand into warm water. Life pulsed beneath. Wriggling larvae hatched early. He imagined a hall here, smoke vents blending with steam, children splashing in shallow pools, while elders traded lore under carven rafters. They tallied distance to migratory herds, checked that avalanches could not bury the site, tested soil where moss pushed through. The valley held a promise. Yet the pass overlook offered vantage and symbolic watchfulness. Jon walked alone to Ridgecrest, his breath pluming and weighed choice. The free folk watched from below, trusting him to weigh well. He closed his eyes, sensing faint tremor in stone, the hush of distant wind. Duty to shield the vulnerable vied against desire to nurture them, but one did not exist without the other. At last he pictured the points connected: Valley Hall for warmth, Pass Outpost for vigilance, a shelter and a watchtower, twin hearts. He descended. "We build both," he said simply. Murmurs rose, surprise, then acceptance, then energy. Plans sprung like thaw grass. The then bronze workers would fashion hinges for heavy oak gates. Val's kin would fell birch for wall planks, leaving living stands intact to honor forest spirits. Tormund pledged he'd wrestle a giant for any cornerstone bigger than his beard. Jon smiled despite himself. Construction commenced as spring's first tendril of thaw unfurled. They cleared snow, shaped foundation blocks, erected winched scaffolding. Jon hauled logs, drove pegs, measured beam spans with a keen eye once used to sight arrow shafts. Children chased each other with sawdust-coated boots. Women wove rush mats to cover earthen floors. Nights were spent round communal fires where flute, drum, and bone whistle rose in polyphonic swirl. One such night, Jon sat sharpening Longclaw as sparks drifted skyward. Val approached, holding a polished horn cup. "Mulled goat's milk," she offered. He accepted, sipping the sweet-hated brew, nodding thanks. She crouched. "You have not asked what I call you when you're not listening." He angled her a look. "Should I?" She traced lines in dirt. "In Old Tongue, you are Snowheart who hunts the dawn. Some shorten it to Dawn Hunter." He exhaled softly. "A song name. Sorry name." She gazed at the half-raised hall where silhouettes toiled against torch glow. "Stories keep us alive. They remind children why wood smoke smells like hope, why giants mourn stars. Will you let the story root?" "No." Jon regarded the keening night sky, aurora flickering like torn silk across the firmament, ghostly green and violet. He remembered standing in Winterfell's Godswood, begging the old gods for identity. Now, beyond walls of stone and politics, identity was not given but grown. "Let it root," he said. Val's smile was quiet triumph. She rose, leaving him with milk and blades and thoughts that no longer cut quite so deep. By midsummer, log walls soared waist-high. Steam vents were converted into smokehouses for meat. The pass outpost foundation was laid of granite slabs. Then stonemasons chipped runes of protection into lintels. Delegations from other clans arrived. Night harpies, frozen claw, Hornfoot fugitives. Some came wary, but they left bearing stories of the Dawn Hunter and his Hall of Peace. Yet not all tidings were warm. Scouts returned with rumors of Southron hunters venturing north, seeking rare pelts and weirwood sap. A band of iron-born reavers, unsated by coastal pillage, had pushed inland, harrying clans near the Long Lake. And whispers persisted of shadows, survivors of the dead, half-frozen monsters who fled the king's fire and lurked in glacier caves. JON convened council again, beneath a birch awning. The hall must be more than refuge, he said. It must be shield. He proposed a range of patrols, rotating bands drawn from each clan, path signs carved to warn of threats, fire torches placed along ridges for signaling. Not forced duty, but shared vigilance. The council debated but soon agreed. He also insisted on rights for the living and the lost. A grove of carved poles, where names of fallen would be burned into wood and recited at each moonrise. A memory hold. The wildlings valued deeds, not carved stone, but they accepted the grove as proof that no death drifted into nameless snow. That night, alone on the ridge, JON touched the feathered branch he still carried. He whispered names only he recalled: Ygritte, Gren, Ed, Daenerys. He placed the branch in fresh snow at the grove center, vows silent but binding, that their stories too would root here. Autumn's first frost painted the valley as the hall's roof closed. Smoke coiled up through a carved wolf-head vent. JON stood on the threshold, calloused hands brushing new-hewn lintel. Free folk thronged inside, marveling at space tall enough to house a mammoth. Runes adorned pillars, mammoth tusk spiral, weirwood leaf, direwolf snarl, dragon wing half-folded. A tribute he permitted at Val's urging, for everything gained carried loss. They named the hall Sigurn, a word in Old Tongue meaning breath after battle. JON accepted the dedication but spoke little, heart swollen. He felt not pride but a grounded certainty, like when he first sat a horse at Winterfell and realized the world could shift beneath him, yet remain loyal if he rode true. This hall, this moot, was a living ride. Outside, snowflakes idled down, early scouts of winter. JON inhaled, exhaled vapor. Ghost leaned into his thigh, whined low, as if sensing some unspoken crest. He scratched the wolf's ears. "We are home," he murmured, but the world did not pause. Alarms sounded from the pass. Horn blasts, 3 short, 1 long. Unknown approach. JON strode for the watchtower stairs, heart already calculating formations. Below, wildlings scrambled, seizing spears. Snow dust swirled. Atop the rampart, he raised a spyglass. Figures emerged from pine shadows, ragged men in patchwork mail, bearing banners dyed sea green, kraken sigil darkened by soot. Iron-born, Shion Pike, at least 30, maybe more unseen. Their leader wore a rusted helm shaped like an eel skull. They stepped slowly, testing ground. JON lowered glass. The hall's newborn peace stood fragile. Bloodshed here could stain foundations before first council gathered. He felt the old chill of battle settle, but it no longer hollowed him. It sharpened. He turned to the then captain at his side. "Sound 2 horns. We meet them as hosts, not enemies." Captain hesitated. Ironborn were raiders by nature. JON's gaze held firm. "If they bring sword, we answer. But we first offer fire." The horns echoed down the rocky throat of the pass. One call of greeting, one of counsel. The Ironborn halted, confused. JON descended, cloak whipping. He strode across fresh snow to a midpoint between forces. Ghost paced at heel. Behind him, Tormund and Val approached, spears lowered but not raised. The ill-helmed leaders skulked forward, one hand on axe. "This wild hell belongs to no man," he snarled. JON's voice carried calm and authority. "No man, but many people. You stand before Sigurn, hall of free folk. Lay down hatred and warm yourself, or raise steel and freeze alone." The Ironborn scoffed. "Pretty words, croaking, but krakens bow to no beggar of snow." JON unsheathed long claw. Valyrian steel glimmered blue. He planted tip in ground. "Then choose friendship or folly." Silence congealed. Snow hissed against blade. The Ironborn studied the crowd, saw numbers, saw readiness, saw the direwolf's eyes glowing. At last he spat. "Winter's curse on you." He jerked a hand. His men backed away, weapons still out but steps retreating. They melted into trees, leaving only trampled snow. JON retrieved his sword, sliding it home. No cheers rose, merely collective exhale. He turned to his people. "Build the watchfires higher," he ordered. "Let every traveler see we guard life here." That night, the hall glowed warm. Children chased sparks that drifted through roof vent. Elders shared broth. JON sat near the center pillar, gaze tracing carvings. Val approached, laying a hand on his shoulder. "A king's mercy today." He shook his head. "A mortal's caution. Mercy takes courage." She studied him. "Courage you own in abundance. Whether you claim title or not, they will call you king beyond the wall." Her voice lowered. "Perhaps accept it, shape it, before someone less true does." JON looked around, faces bright with possibility, laughter stitched into timber. A kingdom not of crowns, but of hearts beating in cold darkness. At the edges of hearing, he thought he could almost make out Bran's voice echo across Raven's wings. History turning. He closed his eyes, listening to the hall's pulse sync with his own. When he opened them, he spoke softly, only to Val, but somehow to all. "If they name me so, then my first decree is simple. No throne will ever stand here, only this hearth. Let that be the crown we gather around." Val's answering smile was all winter's light. Outside, snow continued its silent descent, layering stone and story alike, sealing them into permanence. And beyond the valley, the night watched, wary but, for now, held at bay by the steady flare of Sigurn's fires, and by a king who wore no crown save the frost in his hair and the scars on his soul. One. Snow lapped against the fresh timber of Sigurn's walls, piling in soft folds that deadened all sound, until each crack of wood or scrape of boot felt holy, as though the hall itself breathed, and the valley listened. Jon Snow rose before dawn each morning now, his senses tuned to a rhythm older than memory. The hush of drifting crystals, the far-off groan of ice sheets shifting on basalt, the river's muted churn beneath a crust too thick for light to pierce. When he stretched, the sting of cold through the thin seam in his furs confirmed that life beyond the wall still held teeth. Ghost materialized from the dark, paw pads silent on the plank floor, and together they walked the interior perimeter, counting guttering lamps, adjusting hides that rattled over unsealed joints in the roof. Children sometimes stirred when his shadow passed. More than once tiny fingers brushed the hem of his cloak, reaching to claim a fragment of the story dancing around him. He met their wide eyes with a nod, seldom speaking. Their parents thanked him in ways that needed no words. Fresh broth left by his seat, a bone knife honed finer than any castle grinder could manage, a quiet backing of his decisions during council. The wildlings had begun chiseling his name into antler, bead, and snowstone, carving the letters with reverence hurriedly masked beneath jokes about crows who fancied themselves mammoth. Still, he rejected crown or throne. The day after the Ironborn retreat, 3 elders approached with a circlet of woven frost willow, brittle silver under rime, but he waved it away. No king's steel or branch will rest on my head, save your craft. Yet he carried the circlet's memory, feeling its ghost weight ring his temples when council arguments threatened to fracture. Over the next moons, the patrol scheme took shape. Each clan provided 8 scouts on rotation, armed with horn bows whose strings were greased daily against freeze. JON personally trained a cadre to read southern sigil banners. He taught them the difference between a phrase, twin towers, and a Karstark sunburst, useless knowledge for hunting, vital for knowing who approached. On crisp dawns, he and Val raced the patrols up switchback paths, checking the signal cans, heaps of oil-soaked peat, and brush stacked beneath stone lids. One spark would ignite a beacon chain, visible from valley to ridge. They tested it once. The sky turned orange along 7 peaks, smoke plumes curling as if dragons had returned. Children cheered, elders bowed heads, remembering another fire that nearly ended the world. Afterward, JON ensured each cairn was covered again, water scooped over warm stones until hiss died. Kegs of sour goat milk and dried seal meat arrived from the Night Harpies clan, payment for shared iron chisels. Then smiths hammered bronze plates into hearth cauldrons, big enough to bathe a child. JON watched, disclaiming praise, but his chest filled nonetheless when steam coiled up and giggles echoed through the hall as muddy-kneed youngsters splashed. On the high beams, ravens nested. Some bore white feathers in their wings, an omen of change according to the blind elder, who now spent hours beneath the rafters murmuring to them. JON left him be. If the old man found counsel in bird chatter, so be it. By first frost moon, the pass outpost neared completion. Twin towers of molted granite bridged by a plank walkway, a crude portcullis hewn from ash logs and iron teeth. JON inspected every strut. Longclaw's tip tapped each bolt, ringing with a sound that satisfied him more than any courtier's applause. Yet news rode quick on northern winds. That same day, a scout named Irie Quickwind returned breathless. Slavers flying house umber colors had been sighted 30 leagues south of the Skirling Pass, pursuing a band of Hornfoot refugees. Umbers, JON knew their sigil, linked to Winterfell by blood ties older than parchment. Yet after the wars of the Dragon Queen, allegiances lay twisted as storm-felled pine. He spent the night crouched before the campfire, expression unreadable, while Tormund recounted every known Umber raid in gleeful detail, stoking flames high with punctuating laughter. Big men with little wits, Tormund finished, biting into charred hair. They'll take what they can, then piss on the ashes. JON stared at embers until they blurred. If they cross the pass, we cannot let blood stain the hall. Tormund raised an eyebrow. War already sniffing your doorstep, croaking. Time you decide how hard you bite back. JON rose, cloak swirling. I'll parley. Val's voice cut like lake ice cracking. Parley with slavers. She stood opposite the flames, hair loose about her shoulders, soot-streaked cheeks flushed. A man who chains another is no man. They chained me, JON said quietly, remembering the cell at Dragonstone, the grip of unsullied spears, Daenerys' eyes cold with certainty. Yet they listened when need pressed. They listened, Val echoed, then burned cities anyway. He had no retort. Smoke carried his silence upward. At dawn, he left with a patrol. 6 spearwives, 2 archers, ghost padding white shadow. They traveled light but swift, cutting across frost-crusted hollows beneath a sky the color of hammered pewter. JON wore no sigil, save his direwolf companion. At midday they crossed the Hornfoot band, 20 souls staggering under burlap sacks, feet wrapped only in hide strips. JON sent half his patrol to guide them valleyward while he pressed south with 3 veterans. They found the Umbers camped in an old hunter's dell, ringed by broken birches. Red flayedman banners snapped above wagons, repurposed as cages. skinned banners, not umber but Bolton, heritage of horror resurrected. Jon's gut curdled. 10 men, maybe 12, clad in mismatched mail. Across the dell lay trussed bodies. 2 wildlings, a woman and young man, stripped to waist despite the cold. Jon stepped into clearing, hood lowered. Ghost stalked at flank, a harridan out of legend. Release them, Jon called, voice level. This ground is free, folk ground. Sword scraping free, answered him. A burly fellow wearing a helm with moose antlers spat. Look at this one. Bastard Stark come to claim wild chattel. He sauntered closer, breath voguing ale stench. We traded coin for these 2 in last hearth. Lord Rickon himself. No Umber Lord rules last hearth. Jon interrupted. The house fell years past. You hold no right. A right taken is a right kept. The antlered man grinned, flashing rotted teeth. Tell you what, savages south pay double for a red-haired girl. Maybe you'll fetch thrice. Nibly. That was it. Ghost growled low. Jon lifted long claw an inch. Turn back south. Leave the captives and the wagons. A crossbow quarrel thunked into a tree above his head. Jon moved before thought, Longclaw slicing the air as 2 spearwives burst from birch cover, flanking. The dell erupted, steel rang, snow sprayed crimson. Ghost launched, jaws clamping a bowman's arm with an audible crunch. Jon slid under an axe swing, riposte a severing tendon. He flowed on, blade memory guiding muscle. Twin years of war distilled into lethal economy. Each heartbeat thundered, each breath plumed. The antlered brute lunged, swinging a spiked mace. Jon caught the haft on his pommel, pivoted, boot heel stomping knee until it popped. As the man fell, Jon's blade halted at neck. Yield, Jon growled. The brute spat bloody snow, choked curses. Jon knocked him senseless with hilt, turned. It ended quickly. 2 Umbers lay dead, 4 wounded, the rest fled, boots stamping panic trails south. Jon let them go. The wind would finish what his sword had not. He knelt by the prisoners, cutting bonds. Frostbite already mottled the girl's fingers, but she managed a whispery thank. He draped his cloak over her shoulders. One spearwife, Rora of the frozen claw, wiped gore from cheek. Parley, she muttered, voice thick with dark humor. Jon breathed in, breathed out. Parley ends when slavery begins. They burned the Bolton banners in a heap. The captives, once steadied, insisted on marching beside their rescuers, rather than riding wagons. They feared anything with bars. Night cloaked the world by the time they returned to Sigan. Fires blazed, casting the palisade in flickering gold. Word of the skirmish spread before they crossed threshold. Children pointed, eyes huge. Elders murmured thanks to Weirwood and Spear. Val met him at gate. Her gaze scanned the blood on his gauntlet, the ripped seam on his cloak where a quarrel grazed. She said nothing, only pressed her forehead to his, a gesture of warriors who share fate. Their breaths mingled clouds. In the hall he addressed gathered clans. He spoke of freedom's price, how each patrol must carry mercy in one hand and steel in the other. He recounted the horror of cages, the flayed banners. If we permit such shadow, the long night returns in men's hearts. His words rolled through hush, punctuated by crackling hearths. Some looked away, remembering times they too had taken thralls among rival clans. Tradition clashed with aspiration. Jon did not flinch. From this moment, no man north of the wall shall claim another as property. The hall stands as witness. A spearwife raised voice. And who enforces this law? Dawn Hunter, your wolf? Jon's reply was soft, but carried. We enforce it together. or it breaks us apart." Silence deepened. Then the spear wife thumped her spear butt to floor. A sharp echo. Others followed, first hesitant, soon thunderous. They understood, or at least they chose to try. Winter tightened its grip. Snowstorms like white leviathans pummeled the valley, burying cairns, rattling window shutters. Inside, Sigurd the hearths roared day and night. JON organized lardas, rationed saltfish, monitored root cellars, where carrots shriveled and turnips sprouted blind tendrils. None went hungry, but stores thinned faster than expected. Torment joked that JON's outlawing of cannibalism had cursed them to carrot suppers. JON answered by spearfishing through the milkwater ice, hauling up wriggling silver shadows until his beard froze into one white clump. Midwinter's Eve arrived under skies so clear the aurora painted banners across stars. Tradition demanded story song, a night when every soul shared memory or myth until dawn. JON at first planned to listen only, but after Val's delicate melody about a snow hare who outraced death, the old blind man tapped his staff and said, "Snowheart, your turn. Speak the tale of the wolf and the dragon." Nothing tributes. The hall hushed. JON's stomach hollowed, but he rose. Flames danced up pillars, throwing his shadow tall. He began slowly, of a bastard boy who loved Winterfell's walls, of a white direwolf pup found in snow, of journeys into death and back. He spoke of Ygritte's laugh under a half moon, of Mance Raider's horn, of the king who wielded ice, and of the queen who breathed fire. He did not spare himself, told how love turned to ashes in his hands, how he killed a queen to save a realm, how he ran from crown because crown tasted of blood. He expected horror, anger. Instead, faces reflected sorrow and recognition. When he finished, the blind elder nodded. A true song. Pain makes roots. Then a frail grandmother began a drumbeat, and voices rose around JON, wordless harmony, weaving his grief into communal refrain. He sank to bench. Ghosts had heavy on his boots, and felt tears salt his cheeks. For the first time since King's Landing, they did not burn. Dawn crept pale. While most slept, Val joined him by the entry arch. Snow fell like ash motes. She brushed his arm. "You bared your throat to their knives. Now they would die for you." "Nemoi, Shabhi. I'm no king. Kings demand obedience. You offered truth." She paused. "They crowned you in their hearts tonight." He could not answer. She left him to the hush, the distant hiss of falling snow. Spring thaw arrived grudgingly. Meltwater gurgled beneath drifts. Tree buds peeked green among branches. The hall reopened breezeways. Stink of months-old hides released to sky. Children chased the first insect hatchlings, shouting delight. JON rode patrol daily, mapping fresh terrain exposed by retreating snow. Avalanche scars, new game trails, a hot vent opening in a cliff face that could offer winter refuge. He documented each, charcoal notes on scraped bark strips, his own rough cartography, slowly stitching a world unknown to maesters. One afternoon, scouts returned with sighting of southern riders sporting Stark direwolf banners, actual Starks. JON's heart hammered. He thought of Sansa and her carved stone solar, of Bran and his weirwood throne miles south. Did they seek him? Well, do you despair? He prepared a greeting party, instructing no raised weapons. They met on a ridge, scented of thawing pine. 3 riders cresting, 2 guards in gray and white cloaks, and Sansa Stark herself, auburn hair tucked beneath a fur hood, trimmed with ermine. Her mare picked careful steps through slush. JON halted 10 paces off, sudden ache rising behind ribs. Sansa dismounted, met his eyes with soft relief. "Cousin, Tartu." She did not correct herself. Their sibling bond needed no pedigree. They clasped forearms, then embraced. He felt her trembling, unsure if cold or emotion. "I feared you lost," she murmured against his shoulder. "I wandered," he admitted. "Found something." She stepped back, gaze flicking to wildling escort, Val at his side, Torment lounging with grin. "I see." Her eyes took in the valley below. Plumes of smoke from forges, children chasing dogs by steaming pools. The hall vast and alive. Astonishment wove with calculation across her face. "You built a kingdom." Jon opened mouth to deny, closed it. "Built a refuge." "You always did," she whispered. She glanced at Val, acknowledging, measuring. A quiet nod passed between women. They walked ridge's edge. Sansa spoke of Winterfell rebuilt, of grain stores swelling, of bannermen still fractious. The North was independent now, under Queen Sansa Stark, but safety remained fragile. Rumors reached her, wild clans uniting under a white wolf. Ironborn raids repelled in mountains. She came seeking truth and, perhaps, alliance. Jon listened. "We seek only to live free," he said at length. "No raids south, no spoils." "I know," she replied. "Your song travels faster than ravens." She studied the hall below, smoke drifting lazily. "But freedom stirs fear among men who measure power in walls and gold. They will come to test you." She turned to him, eyes flint. "I would rather stand beside you than across a field." Jon exhaled fog. The notion of formal oath unsettled him. Yet memory of Bolton banners burning in snow reminded him not all Southrons bore goodwill. He tapped Longclaw's hilt. "What form?" "Act of mutual defense." Sansa's voice steeled into queenly cadence. "Should wild folk be threatened by southern lords, Winterfell sends aid. If the walls remains crumble and dead things stir again, you warn us first. Trade rights, furs and obsidian in exchange for iron tools and grain." She softened. "And a promise between kin. The memory of the dead honored equally." He considered. Trade would bolster ladders. Grain could prevent lean winters. Iron might forge better spearheads, but acceptance risked accusations from within. Some clans hated Stark name. He gazed down valley, where a then-child chased a hornfoot pup, laughter bright. Their future mattered more than grudges. "I'll bring it before Moot." Val caught his eye, an unspoken question. He nodded. She inclined her head, already calculating how to present treaty without smelling of conquest. That night Moot convened, benches packed, smoke thick with resin. Sansa, veiled, sat quietly among elders, a listener, not ruler. Jon addressed clan chieftains, voice strong. The pact guaranteed no tribute, only exchange of gifts equal in weight. Elders debated fiercely. Memories of night's watch hunts, of winter starvation when southern lords hoarded grain. But then Raga stood, shield glinting torchlight. "When a bear wakes sore, best share honey than hear it growl." Laughter rippled. Val spoke next, framing grain as seed for freedom. Children fed grow tall enough to fight giants. Support swelled. A vote. Each clan poured a pebble into one of two bowls, accept or reject. When emptied, the accept bowl brimmed. Sansa's eyes shone. And they signed. Jon pressed direwolf blood print onto birch parchment. Sansa added Stark wax. They embraced once more before she rode south. "The realm will whisper about a king beyond the wall," she teased. "Let them." He shrugged, half smile. "Let them come see." Summer's breath greened the valley. Gardens sprouted around hot pools. Moss lettuce, frost berries, onions. Jon kneeled in soil beside children, showing how to lift earthworms gently. how to pat seedlings firm. He felt grounded in a way war never gave. Ghosts dozed nearby, belly up to sun, yet storms brewed beyond peacetime clouds. Raga approached one evening, brow furrowed. Scouts of mine vanished near the shivering forest. Tracks suggest dead shapes, silent as moonlight. JON's pulse quickened. Not whites, surely. Those fell when Night King died. But cold, preserved horrors. He gathered a party. Val, Rora, the blind elder whose other senses might warn of unnatural hush. They trekked west, 3 days beneath looming glaciers. At forest edge, they found carnage. Animals frozen upright, turned toward something unseen. Eyes rimed in ice. Hoarfrost crept along trunks, though air remained mild. At night, the wind whispered words none could pass. The blind elder touched bark, hissed. Memory wrong here. Something stirs the deep ice. They ventured farther, weapons drawn. Ghosts' hackles, spike. Moonlight fanned through twisted boughs onto a clearing where a mound of snow pulsed faint blue. JON approached, heart hammering. A shard of the Night King's spear. Black ice glimmering, embedded in earth. Somehow lost during final war, now seeding corrupt cold. Around it, the ground crackled with unnatural frost, creeping outward like veins. One spearwife reached to pry it free. JON barked for caution, but too late. Her hand contacted shaft. She screamed, skin whitening in spiderweb patterns. JON zitzed her shoulder, yanking back. Flesh tore black where ice clung. He dragged her clear, bundled cloth around wound. Frostbite crept. They retreated beyond ring of dead leaves, built fire, warmed her limbs. Heat slowed spread, but did not halt blistering. JON stared at spear shard. Memory flooded. Dennery's falling, Drogon's roar, Arya's dagger strike. He thought the scourge ended, yet frost hearts died reluctantly. At dawn they improvised tongs from bronze, hammered spikes to wedge under the shard, and hewed a box from green wood, lining it with elk fat and wool. They pried spear free. The clearing exhaled, ice retreating a finger's breadth. They sealed the shard inside, lashed box with rawhide, poured hot pitch. The wounded spearwife traveled on sled. Her arm blistered, but she lived. Back in Sigurn, council gathered. Fear rippled. JON laid box before them, recounted danger. Relics of the dead king remain, he said. We must hunt them. Destroy them. But how? Fire melted ice, yet shards resisted. Then smiths suggested forging kiln with dragon glass lining. Val proposed hurling shards into deepest sea abyss. JON pondered ravens to dragonstone. Stannis leftover stores of wildfire, perhaps. The blind elder rose. Ice remembers ice. Seek the cave of the children. Old fire burns there. He spoke of a cavern in Frostfang roots, where blue fire once kindled to forge obsidian. Legends spoke of heat older than dragons. JON resolved to lead expedition. He chose volunteers, Raga to represent clans, Val by right, Tormund for strength, 2 smiths to study heat. The wounded spearwife insisted on joining, scarred arm bound in fur, eyes fierce. Before departure, JON addressed the whole. We journey to end what lingers, so our children need not. Murmurs of blessing followed. No speeches, only hands clasped on shoulders. They set out under waning moon. Snow melt turned trails to mire. Midges swarmed. They crossed roaring cataract where hot springs gushed from cliff, scaling moss-slick ledges. On 6th day they spied cave mouth, a maw of midnight behind curtains of ice stalactites. Inside, air steamed like forge breath. Obsidian vines striped walls, pulsing faint ember. Deeper still, they found a subterranean lake, glowing cerulean, its surface unnaturally still. At center, a stone dais rose, carved with spiral symbols. JON knelt, placed box. The lake's light intensified, casting skeletal patterns on ceiling. He sensed consciousness, or memory, within stone. He opened pitch seal. Frost hissed. Blue light met blue ice. A hum reverberated. The shard quivered, floated, drawn toward lake. JON stepped back as it drifted over water, descending slow as feather. Surface parted soundlessly. Spear sank, glow brightening until unbearable, then extinguished. Silence. Water stilled. A warm breeze, impossible underground, swept across their faces, smelling of pine soil and sunlit earth. The wounded spearwife gasped, her scarred flesh flushed healthy pink, pain easing. They watched, awestruck, as the dais cracked, releasing a plume of shifting colors that ascended like aurora, pinned inside stone, dissipating into ceiling. Torment exhaled. Well, that was something. JON touched the healed arm. The woman flexed fingers, tears in eyes. Whatever power lingered, child of ice and fire, had answered. He wondered if Bran foresaw this, if the world itself craved balance. They mapped the cave, marking it taboo, place of memory and healing, not conquest. On return, clans gathered to hear tale. The shard's doom became legend within days, sung to bone flute accompaniment. Children etched spiral glyphs in snow, reacting spearfall. Hope surged. Past winters held horrors, but maybe scars could mend. Alliance with Winterfell flourished. Grain caravans arrived before next frost, escorted by northern outriders who gaped at mammoth bone gates and traded salted cod for birch ale. Wildlings gifted wolf pelt cloaks to Stark soldiers. The soldiers, in turn, taught shield wall drills to eager young raiders. Misunderstandings erupted. One Stark accused of stealing a hork knife, a hornfoot boy pricked by curiosity within a supply wagon. But JON judged with fairness, exiling no one, compelling reparation through work on hall extension. As autumn bled to gray, a raven arrived bearing Bran Stark's seal. The letter, brief, warned of gathering storm in far east. The shadow of a great fleet under a black wolf banner, strange to all maesters. JON read lines thrice, feeling chilled deeper than winter. Not Greyjoy krakens, nor Southron lions. A different power, perhaps free cities uniting exiles under new pretender. Bran urged vigilance, offered knowledge gleaned through roots and wings. JON folded parchment. He summoned moot. Trouble brews across narrow seas. If armies land south, lords will turn eyes north again, seeking easy conquest to prove strength. Our valley must be ready. He proposed fortifying pass outpost with a second wall of timber palisade, towers capped by slate. Some balked, too much effort. But Thens volunteered bronze hinges if Stark sent extra iron. Sansa's envoys agreed. Work began, hammers ringing. At dusk JON walked ramparts, considering ghosts yet to come. Val joined, their cloaks mingling in gusts. You stand like a tree in storm, she said. I feel like sapling, he replied. Then your roots are strong. She leaned on battlement, gaze sweeping horizon. You fear the song ends. Songs end when singers die. She smiled, then let others learn the melody. She placed hand on his chest. Let me. He met her eyes, saw reflection of distant fires and present warmth. Since Ygritte kept heart shuddered, but snow and time had worn creeks smooth. He covered her hand with his own, wordless. Days deepened into comfortable pattern. Dawn patrols, council disputes, hammer ring forging, night fires. JON taught children letters of common tongue, carving them into birch bark. They scribbled messages on valley stones, secret codes he pretended not to decipher. Ghost wandered among them like silent guardian, accepting scraps of dried hair. One frost-pricked night, as moon blinked through scudding cloud, horns blasted thrice. Danger. Jon rolled from furs, blade in hand, racing to watchtower. Shadows moved at tree line, torchlights bobbing. Scouts signaled friend, foe unknown. Jon peered. Silhouettes tall as giants but hunched. Armor glinted warped silver. Not men. He clenched jaw. Tails of ice whites again? But movement held rhythm of breath, not death. When figures entered torch throw, gasps rose. Giants. 2 remained in north, legends said. Yet here marched at least 4, pelts matted with frost, blue tattoos swirling arms. Between them shuffled smaller forms, giant children. Their eyes held fear, not fury. Jon descended, ordered open gates. Elders protested. Giants once broke watchtowers. He silenced them with look. Fear bred ignorance. He strode out, hands empty but presence solid. The lead giant knelt painfully, knees scraping, snow. His booming voice, halting, emerged in old tongue. "White wolf man, help! Fire sea brings stone sickness." Jon gleaned meaning with Val's translation. Far north coast belched black tar, poisoning seal rookeries. Giants fled famine. Jon invited them into valley, offered pools for warmth. The hall doors widened, pillars straining under sudden new guests. But wildlings gathered gifts. Haunches of smoked elk, barrels of lichen wine. Giants accepted with tears that froze on cheeks. Raga watched, awed. Your hall now houses giant kind. Songs will burst. Jon felt weight, but also pride. He appointed a grove beyond main camp where giants could raise tents of mammoth hide, far from delicate structures. Children ventured there to listen to booming lullabies. In return, giants agreed to topple heavy spruce for new palisade, pulling trunks with ease. Work accelerated. Walls thickened, towers rose higher, adorned with carved giant script promising guardianship. As year turned, Jon convened great moot, first of its name. Clans assembled, giants included, stark envoys, even 3 maesters braving wild to witness. They debated trade routes, marriage pacts, rights for newborns. They argued but found consensus under hall rafters. Jon chaired yet never ruled, decisions tallied by vote. When disputes stalemated, he offered wisdom but final, say lay collective. At closing, the blind elder rose slowly, staff thudding. This hall stands because one man chose hearth over throne. Yet a hearth needs keeper. He faced Jon, Snowheart, Dawn Hunter, Wolf King without crown. Will you speak the vow of keeper? Hush, like falling snow. Jon's breath hitched. He scanned faces. Val strong, Tormund eager, Raga stoic. Children perched on beams. Giants huddled by doors. Stark envoys scribbling notes. He felt threads tying him to each. Threads of stories shared, blood shed, meals broken. He stepped forward, heartbeat steady. "I vow," he said, voice carrying, "to guard the fire, not own it, to listen before leading, to raise no throne higher than hearth, to walk first into storm, last from feast, equal in burden and bounty. Should I break vow, let the snows bury my name." Nolise. A murmur of acceptance rolled. The elder dipped staff to floor. Giants thumped chests. Horns sounded once, drawn and resonant. No crown touched Jon's brow, yet an invisible mantle settled, warm, woven of voices not gold. That night, he and Val stood outside, Aurora shimmering. She touched feathered branch at his belt, faded but cherished. "Stories root deep now," she whispered. "They'll outlive us. he answered. Good. She grinned. Because children will add chapters. He blinked. She laughed, slipping away into hall glow. Jon exhaled, watching breath spiral skyward like prayer. Ghost sidled, pressing against leg, amber eyes reflecting dancing lights. Jon scratched ears, feeling pulse of valley. Forges ringing, babies murmuring, giants snoring like distant thunder, river chuckling beneath ice, all part of a kingdom with no crown, yet bound by promise. And somewhere south, banners rallied under distant rulers, storms brewed. But in this pocket of wilderness, hope burned steady. Jon Snow, the king beyond the wall without a throne, kept watch, blade sharp, heart open, knowing dawn would always follow even the longest night, so long as someone dared to kindle the first spark and guard it with their life. Each showman shall pide. Night shrouded the valley in a hush, like breath held between heartbeats. The only sound, the distant creak of birch boughs rubbing against one another in the early autumn wind. Jon Snow stood alone atop the tallest tower of the pass fort, cloak snapping behind him, watching the aurora bleed green and violet across the northern sky like shattered stained glass. The watchfires dotted every ridge now, bright dashes of ochre that blinked in steady rhythm, each one manned in silent pledge to the pact forged during the Great Moot. The distant flicker of flames marked a new constellation, an earthly mirror to the heavens, signal to any wanderer that hope existed beyond the horizon. He rested his gloved hands on the frost-roughed stone, listening to the muffled snore of giants in their camp below, and the faint, chanted lullabies of spear wives, settling children under hide tents where warmth drifted from earth vents. In the far distance a lone horn answered, its note soft yet confident, patrolling scouts confirming clear routes. Jon let the sound settle in his bones. He had never imagined a night so full of quiet industry, every voice and flicker of light woven into a single pulse. But he also felt the tremor of darkness coiling beyond sight. The fleet Bran had warned of, sails black as mourning mantles, water churning beneath hulls, prowled by wolves that wore no crown of Stark. Below, the forges of Sigurn hammered late, showering sparks that clung to the chill air before fading, like meteors born only to die in a heartbeat. The then smiths thought in bronze, shaping shields stamped with swirling spiral designs, meant to deflect both blade and memory, while stark ironsmiths shaped steel spearheads that sang perceptibly purer when struck. The clangor drifted upward in muted thuds, comforting proof that folk who once scattered at the hiss of fire now embraced it as creed. Jon could almost feel their rhythm guiding his own heartbeat, fast, steady, purposeful. He turned from the battlement only when the night's bite seeped through fur and leather into the old scars on his chest. Ghost rose from the shadowed stairwell, red eyes reflecting aurora ghosts, tail sweeping snow as the wolf matched his pace down the stone steps. They passed between double portcullises, spearmen saluting with the half-raised shafts that marked trust rather than rigid discipline. Jon tipped his chin, acknowledging each by name, then crossed the packed earth courtyard where the giant Durham, towering even seated, carefully etched runes into a slate slab. The giant's fingertip carved grooves with the delicacy of a jeweler despite its breadth. Jon paused, watching as the rune for home emerged, sharp and sure. Durham glanced up and rumbled something half-song, half-greeting. Jon answered in the handful of giant words he had learned, earning a tusked smile before continuing toward the hall. Inside Sigurn, heat wrapped him like a living cloak. Fresh pine resin scented the air, mingling with stew of elk and root vegetables simmering in cauldrons large enough to bathe in. Dozens of conversation rivulets trickled through the open space, a dispute over trapping territory hashed out near the hearth. Two maesters debating how to describe molten snow glass in Old Valyrian. Children laughing over a bone dice game invented that afternoon. He felt the hall's heartbeat strongest here. the intangible surge of community that steadied his breaths. Val stood at the long table, portioning out slices of juniper bread to the newly arrived Hornfoot hunters. Her braids glimmered under lamplight, interwoven with black raven feathers plucked from the nests above the rafters. She sensed him before seeing him, turned with a quiet smile that held both greeting and question. He joined her, taking a steaming wooden bowl and spoon, then settling at the table's end, where older spearwives lounged amid smoke plumes. Val slid onto the bench beside him, boots nudging his beneath the plank. "How stirs the night?" she asked, voice pitched low but resonant. He described the steady rhythm of horns, the bright watchfires standing like sentinels. She listened while breaking bread into small pieces for Ghost to crunch. Every so often she nodded, eyes narrowing with appreciation or concern. When he mentioned the fleet again, her hand stilled. "We have not yet received new ravens from Bran," she mused. "Perhaps the ships turned east, or slowed for winter harbors," JON countered. "Either way, we must prepare." They both knew preparation here meant more than forging weapons. Wildling clans had never marched in formal shield wall. Teaching them without erasing their individuality remained a riddle. Yet if well-oiled legions disembarked in White Harbor or Eastwatch, the valley would stand first in their path. An idea that kept JON awake even when exhaustion dulled his eye. The conversation eased as Tormund shouldered through a knot of laughing beanpole youths, thumping steins onto the table. "Drink," he bellowed, foam spraying. "To our king who refuses crowns, and to the queen who keeps him honest." Laughter rippled. Jon's cheeks warmed, partly from drink thrust into his hand, partly from the title's persistence. He met Tormund's grin with a resigned shrug. "Better honest than comfortable," he quipped, eliciting a roar. The draught tasted of pine and honey, strong enough to numb the edges of worry. But it could not wholly dull the memory Bran's raven bore. Sketches of sigils unseen in any maester's role, black hounds poised to devour. The call of the horizon tugged. Once supper ended, JON roused the night council. Raga, Val, Tormund, the old blind elder called Masai, and 2 Stark riders whose presence Sansa insisted upon for liaison. They gathered near the western alcove, where maps inked on tanned hides draped the wall. By touching charcoal-marked mountains and river forks, they plotted adjustments to patrol routes, determined which cairns needed extra pitch, selected volunteers to receive additional drilling in cross-clan shield formations. Raga favored a wedge shaped like a broken spar spear. Giantsbane preferred a loose ring with gaps for skirmishers. Masai argued for overlapping crescent arcs that mirrored the moon's waxing. JON mediated, coaxing compromise. 2 patterns drilled on alternating weeks so fighters learned adaptability, not rigidity. Hands flew across the hide map, tracing pivot arcs and fallback points. By Candle's exhaustion, they reached consensus. Their disagreements resolved through sparring wit rather than blade. As council broke, JON lingered beside Masai, watching the blind elder trace calloused fingertips across the hide lines. "Water will flood these rivers come thaw," Masai murmured. "Ice memory tells me the pass might drown." JON made note to station rope bridges higher, to store timber in anticipation. Every whisper mattered now, each precaution a stone in the wall of survival. Long past midnight, after others lay snoring, JON walked beneath star-smothered sky toward the giant encampment. He found Durham humming low at the central fire, carving another slate slab, runes glinting ember orange. The giant offered the stone. JON accepted, feeling ridges spell dawn. New day. He thanked the gentle craftsman, promising to mount the rune above the watchtower's arch come sunup. Durham nodded solemnly, the movement stirring a flurry of sparks that rose like fireflies. Jon's path then wound beside the steaming milkwater, where mist curled over black water while tiny ice floes bobbed like silent ghosts. He crouched at the bank, palm hovering over surface, sensing heat from subterranean springs fighting the onset of winter. It reminded him of the precarious balance the valley struck, warmth and cold locked in constant dance, much like his own inner scales weighing duty and desire. He returned to Sigrun, slipping through wolfskin curtain to the private chamber built into the hall's back wall, once a storage alcove, now partitioned by birch panels. A single tallow taper burned. Val lay on furs, book of runes open. She looked up, reading his unease. The fleet still in your head? He sat beside her, rubbing temples. I keep seeing sails against moonlight, silent, inexorable. She closed the book, reaching to unwrap his gloves, warming his fingers in hers. Fear is a tool, she whispered, and you wield it well when you remember it cuts both ways. Those who come north will fear the unknown. Let us ensure what they find humbles them. Nai Soma. They spoke long into the pre-dawn mapping steps, training singers to carry coded warnings through valleys, converting old mammoth rib bones into horn trumpets, whose notes could roll for leagues, stockpiling arrow shafts and obsidian heads. Plans circled until exhaustion pressed pupils heavy. Eventually JON slept, dreamless, ghost curled sentinel at their feet. The direwolf's breath steady as ocean surges. Morning dawned copper, sun clawed above Frostfang peaks. JON rose to hammer blows sounding outside, the smiths already at work. Steam coiled from the pools, blending with smoke. He met Tormund near the paddock where reindeer kicked up frost. South Scout party spied prints near Witch Willow Groves, Tormund reported. Boots, not ours. JON's jaw clenched. How many? Hard to say. Light step, maybe 10. Could be deserters, could be advanced scouts. JON summoned a quick task force. Himself, Tormund, Raga, 2 silent footpads from the Frozen Claw, and 1 giant youth lanky for his kind, but swift. They rode reindeer to the grove before midday. What they found stilled conversation. Triangular tents of black canvas, each stamped with white hound icons, set in silent ring. Coal still glowed in a central pit. No bodies, no lingering warmth. JON knelt, brushing finger along ash. Greasy residue suggested rendered fat, provisions of long voyage. He examined boot prints, heel drag pattern distinct to sailors used to pitch roll of decks. They had left not hours earlier. Tormund sniffed the air, face grim. Southwark men, he growled. Smell of spam and onion, no mountain herbs. Giant youth sniffed likewise, nodding. A glint along the stream bank caught Raga's eye. A copper coin etched with a wolf's head missing 1 eye. Not star, some sell-sale emblem maybe. JON pocketed it. Then the Frozen Claw trackers returned with unsettling news. A child's footprints among the larger prints, stride shortened as though bound. They followed trail north toward thin birch stands. JON signaled silent approach. When they neared crest of low ridge, a sharp whistle stopped them, one of their own scouts hidden in fir branches. The woman signaled 2 fingers, then pointed ahead. JON crept with her until the ridge spilled into a small dell where 6 prisoners knelt, 3 children, 2 women, 1 old man, hands tied, guarded by 5 armored figures in black and gray lamellar. Their helmets bore snarling wolf maws. One raised a narrow crossbow to poke at the old man's shoulder, barking in guttural accent JON could not parse. JON weighed assault angles, but he decided the giant youth behind him loosed a guttural roar, instincts overruling caution. The dell erupted in chaos. Crossbow bolts flew wild. The youth crashed through birch trunks like a bear, swinging a club hewn from uprooted sapling. JON cursed and sprinted, sword out. Tormund whooped, charging. Bow. Arrows hissed from Frozen Claw. Bows. The enemy reacted fast, moving with drilled precision, shielding, spacing, but they had not prepared for a giant. 2 fell under the club's sweep, bones crunching. JON closed with another, parrying short sword, riposting clean through gorget seam. The man gurgled, mask flooding red. Raga grappled forth, slitting hamstrings. Fifth tried to flee, but a reindeer cut him off, snorting. He dropped blade, jabbered surrender. Battle ended in heartbeats. Prisoners sobbed as bonds were cut. JON knelt to reassure children, who flinched at direwolf but soon stared wide-eyed wonder. Tormund hauled the surviving enemy to kneel, ripping off helm. A woman's face glared back, one eye tattooed over with black wolf ink, teeth filed into points. She spat at snow. JON crouched. Why take them? She laughed, blood on lip. Tribute to the night wolf. Great packs, march. Your little campfires will feed them. JON asked Origin. She only repeated phrase, night wolf, like prayer. When pushed, she bit Tormund's wrist, drawing blood. Giant youth lifted club, but JON halted him. Not this way. Instead they bound her, marched captives and prisoner back to Sigurn. Along route, the children described kidnapping near White Knife River. Raiders burned cottages, branded livestock with claw sigil. The old man said their leader wore frost steel mail that gleamed in moonlight, voice harsh but measured. JON memorized every detail. Back at Hall, Ehlers treated wounds, moving quickly around giant youth's parade of guilt. They called him Gentle Fang for sparing a girl by shielding her from stray bolt. Night Council convened. Prisoners secured behind ironwood lattice above lava vents' warmth, ensuring frostbite could not excuse silence. Masai listened to her muttered chants, then pronounced language a bastard mix of Bravosi and Skago's old tongue. The phrase Night Wolf rang of myth. A warlord of Skagos, who centuries ago proclaimed himself Fenris reborn, devourer of thrones. JON recalled stray passages in old Nan's tales, but maesters had dismissed them. Debate raged. Some clamored to execute prisoner as warning. Others called for sending her south to Winterfell. JON ruled for confinement until ravens delivered counsel. Meanwhile, all patrols doubled. Smiths shaped new helms with cheek guards to protect from filed tooth bites. Spearheads hardened by quenching in hot spring water laced with bone ash, giving steel smoky hue. They trained shield walls at dawn, giants pounding drums to set cadence. Days blurred, crafting, drilling, scouting. The children from Raid integrated into hall life swiftly. Youngest girl, Mira, took to Ghost, braiding ribbons through his mane. Older boy helped Raga fletch arrows. Their laughter reminded everyone why fires burn. One frigid evening as first flurries fell, ravens arrived from Winterfell, and from Old Town boat. Sansa's letter warned of coastal sightings, black wolf sails raiding Barrowton shipping lanes. Old Town's raven, in ink thin as spider thread, claimed anonymous sell sales had cornered iron ore markets, paying with silver-stamped half-wolf image. The symbol matched JON's coin, the circled tightening rings. JON assembled moot again. We cannot wait behind walls, he said. We strike scouts, bleed them, learn their mettle. Debate sparked, but Raga's spear point on table echoed agreement. Tormund slammed palm in support. Val's voice steadied them. A fence buys time for walls to grow, securing majority. A raiding party formed. 50 seasoned hunters, 10 Stark sergeants, 2 giants, Ghost at 4. JON did not don lordly armor. Still black leather stitched with fur, long claw at hip. They headed southwest, following path gleaned from prisoners' directions, across rime plains that glimmered cobalt beneath waning moon. Snowstorm blew sideways daggers. Men leaned into wind. Giants huffed plumes that drifted like smoke. On third sunset, they crested ridge and saw lights flickering in a bowl of land. An encampment, dozens of black tents, a crude palisade of sharpened stakes gleaming with ice. Banners flapped, a snarling wolf's skull devouring a moon disk. Jon's pulse quickened. They waited until midnight. Snow muffled approach as skirmishers crawled to within bowshot. Giants readied boulders hefted from frozen creek. Jon signaled. Bay. Silence shattered. Arrows whistled. Boulders crashed through stakes. Shouts rose. Jon sprinted through blowing ember sparks from a torched wagon, parrying behind shield. Stark sergeants formed wedge, wildlings swirling around flanks, axes chipping mail. Raiders fought savagely but disorganized, surprised by giants and ghost-pale direwolf plunging through canvas walls. Within minutes, outer camp burned. A horn blast deep within rang curiously steady. Another section of palisade swung open, revealing rank upon rank of armored men kneeling with crossbows already cranked. Bolts hissed, felling 2 hunters and a giant's thigh, but not halting charge. Jon ducked behind broken cart, assessing. This second force carried discipline, lined in staggered tiers. He glimpsed Commander, tall figure in raven cloak, helm shaped like lupine snarling. The commander barked orders. They spoke Westerosi but tinged with Braavosi cadence. Jon rallied sergeants, forming shield roof advance, while giants flung torn timber. The formation pressed, bolts thudding into pine boards, some punching through but slowed. Closer now, Jon saw Commander draw a long slender blade curved like a narwhal tusk, edge black. They engaged, shields clashing, sword ringing. Jon slipped under a thrust, riposte slashing, but the commander pivoted, parrying with preternatural smoothness. Their blades locked. Through visor slits, Jon saw eyes shining pale silver, not ice blue of the dead nor brown of men. The commander hissed, "Wolf, who bows to no crown at last, shows teeth." Jon shoved, breaking lock. "You've come far to die," he growled. They traded blows, long claws Valyrian rippling versus black steel that sparked strange blue at contact. Each hit reverberated as though striking stone. Around them battle roared, giants stamping, Stark sergeants holding line, ghost dragging a raider by calf tendon. Jon feinted left, then sliced right, but black sword flicked high, grazing his shoulder through boiled leather. Pain flared cold, like touch of spear shard once more. He gasped. Commander pressed advantage, sweeping. Jon dropped to knee, stabbed upward, slicing hamstring. The commander staggered. Jon rose, pommel smashing helm visor wide, exposing pale-skinned face marred by scars shaped like claws. The man snarled wordless and lunged again. This time, Jon sidestepped, hooking arm, driving long claw into armpit seam. Black steel clanged from his pauldron. Blood hissed like snow on coals. The commander fell, eyes blazing defiance even as life fled. At once, raiders faltered, lines crumbling. Tormund's roar carried, giants charged, scattering remaining ranks. Soon only pockets of resistance remained, hunted down or captured. Fires consumed tents, lighting snow crimson. Jon ordered pursuit, halted. Survivors herded, weapons taken, wounds bound. He searched Commander's corpse. Chain of black wolf medallions, vellum scroll sealed wax mark of serpent coiled around sword. He pocketed both. The black sword he tried to lift, but chill radiated through gloves. He wrapped it in felt and bound with leather. They returned to Sigrun battered but victorious, just as dawn brushed peaks pastel pink. Bells clanged. People poured from hall, cheering, though cheers quieted at sight of fallen on sleds. Healers ran. Children fetched water. Tormund carried bolt-struck giant on litter, sorrow creasing his jovial mien. The valley rang with mingled grief and triumph. That night Jon stood before council displaying medallions and scroll. Stark maester cracked wax. Within lay marching orders scripted in low Valyrian, interlaced with runic cipher. It spoke of Night Wolf, forging pact with Selsail lords, promising plunder of Snow Hearth, return of true ice bloodline. The scroll bore signature of Scanai's Fenrock, warden of the devouring pack. Mosai recited legend. Fenrock, heir to Skagos warlord blood, claimed descent from Night's Watch, deserter turned skin changer who bonded with giant direwolves. Myth said Fenrock awaited signs. Shard of night ice, wolf's crown fallen, to march on both Wall and Winterfell. JON thought of Spear Shard, now dissolved and shivered. Council argued, was Commander Fenrock or vassal? Were more camps forming? JON listened and decided. Prisoners questioned separately, cross-examined by maesters. Ravens dispatched to Sansa detailing threat. Patrols pushed south beyond Skirling Pass to intercept further camps. Hull resources channeled to swift-build watercraft for river patrol. Giants volunteered logs. Tormund boasted of building raft, big enough to carry mammoth and maiden boat. Laughter pushed back fear. 3 days later, Sansa rode in again, flanked by knights, and dwarfed by 2 wains filled with grain and iron. She convened private council with JON, Val, and maesters. The black sword chilled room even wrapped. Maesters confirmed metal unknown, perhaps forged with obsidian powder. Sansa proposed forging mirror blades of Valyrian, but JON shook head. No time, few smiths. Instead, they agreed to melt down captured crossbow bolts, recast tips with mixture of giant bonarust and obsidian to pierce Lomellar. That evening, Sansa walked ramparts with JON, icy wind whipping her cloak. "You stand at edge of legend," she said softly. "The tales the bards will sing." He grimaced. "Tales cost nothing. Lives do." She touched his arm. "Then let the tales pay their debt by shaping hope." She gazed down at hall lights reflecting in pools. Bran sees threads stretching years. "He says your hearth is hinge upon which northern peace swings." JON stared at horizon where gray clouds gathered. "Tell Bran hinges break if weight too great." Sansa smiled sadly. "Then we lighten it." She offered more grain, smiths, bowyers. He countered with furs, obsidian, and knowledge of thaw seasons dieting southern farmers. An alliance deeper than ink formed. Winter descended early. Snow drifts rose shoulder high. Gusts howled through passes with voices of ancient ghosts. But Valley thrived. Greenhouses, wood and hide frames over hot vents, grew bitter leaf, winter onions. Children studied reading by seal oil lantern. Skirmishes with Nightwolf scouts continued, each time wildlings adapting tactics. Giants acting as living battering rams, shield walls tightening under Stark sergeant drills. Word spread. Beyond the wall stood fortress of fire and ice, led by White Wolf, who bore no crown but commanded hearts. Some southern peasants fled north seeking refuge from bandit lords. JON accepted them after vow to live free and share burden. They learned to fish through ice, to respect giants, to carve runes. One storm-lashed night, prisoner with tattooed eye escaped cell, aided by sympathizer from Fringe Hornfoot clan, still clinging to old raiding ways. They stole reindeer, fled west. Hunt party chased, finding them near ridge but not in time. The prisoner plunged dagger into her savior's chest, then herself, whispering, "Nightwolf devours fear." Her death left more questions. JON ordered anyone caught conspiring executed or exiled. The Hall's first true law carrying penalty. Some murmured that King Beyond the Wall showed teeth at last. Months ground on. Snow sculpted everything into soft mounds. Patrols brought news of Nightwolf's fleet wintering near Skagos, building fort holds along coast. A great host gathered, but icebound seas delayed sail. JON saw a window, one season to strengthen or sue for peace. He chose strength. Giants carved menhirs marking new defensive line. Smiths forged repeating crossbows modeled on raiders' designs but using elk tendon torsion. Maesters brewed bone glue to seal fletchings against damp. Women and older children wove jute nets laced with obsidian shards meant to foul landing craft. Each task sang part of chorus. In longest night of year, while aurora danced like dragons above, JON gathered hold for ceremony at Memory Grove. Names of every fallen, wildling, giant, stark, even southern settler, carved on poles now numbering dozens. Each child carried torch, each adult placed sprig of pine at base. JON spoke minimal words. "We remember." Silence then. Snowflakes fell slow, settling on flames, turning them to narrow blue tongues before dying. But hearts warmed, grief braided into steel. Val stepped beside JON, placing hand over his. In hush, she announced they would wed at thaw. Pledge not as queen and king, but as hearth keepers. Jeering broke silence. Giants bellowed, maesters clapped. Torment pretended outrage at not being bride, but insisted on brewing barrel of wild bear ale. JON smiled shy for first time in memory, feeling weight lighten indeed. Spring crept beneath snow crust, rivers cracking thunderous as ice surrendered. Sigrun buzzed. Wedding preparations interwove with brass urgent drills. JON insisted ceremony simple. Sacred pool rimmed with birch, vows spoken in both common and old tongue, no crown. Maasai officiated, hands trembling but voice strong. Val wore white wolf fur over braided feathers, JON a tunic of sky gray woven by 3 clans' sewers. They exchanged carved bone rings, direwolf intertwined with raven feather, symbols of night and dawn. When Maasai declared them bound, cheers shattered stillness. Giants hoisted logs, set ablaze, lifted them skyward like pillars of sunrise. Feast unfurled across valley, spit-roasted elk, glacier berry wine, sturgeon steaks steamed on hot stones. Torment recited body saga of a crow who loved a bear. Laughter cascaded. In deep night, JON and Val slipped to watchtower, looking at flickering bonfires below. She leaned into him. "I never thought I'd wed a crow." He kissed her forehead. "I never thought I'd rule without throne." She traced scar on his neck. "We do what tales do not expect." He stroked her braid. "We do what must." Aurora burst overhead, ribbons kaleidoscopic. They watched silent. Days after wedding, ravens arrived. Sansa reporting night wolf emissaries approached Moat Cailin, demanding rite of passage. Lords gathered armies. Bran dreamed of stone jaws closing on river of blood. JON convened council, reading omen. Decision heavy but unanimous. A delegation must sail to Skagos, learn heart of threat, perhaps cut it before ships unfurl. JON volunteered. Val insisted join. Tormund refused to stay behind. Giants argued until one chosen, Durham, wise and steady. Stark shipwrights had built a stout caravel from pine and bronze nails, christened Dawnfire. They launched at Milk Bay where glacier runoff met sea, waves lapping iron gray. Before departure, JON addressed Valley. "Hearth stands strong. While we journey, its flame is yours to guard. A keeper leaves, but Hearth remembers." Children chorused promise. Elders lifted torches. Giants pounded chests. He locked eyes with Raga and Stark captains. "Defend Valley, keep peace." Dawnfire set sail under sky of seething clouds. JON stood at prow, ghost beside him, ice spray stippling fur. Behind, Val tightened hood, her gaze brimstone bright. Tormund tied knots, singing verse about sea wives with shark teeth. Durham stowed crates, humming low rune tune. Wind filled black and white striped sail depicting direwolf and raven entwined. Sigrun's banner chosen by clan. As shore receded, watchfires blurred to pinpoints. JON felt Valley's pulse still, faint but steady, in his chest. Night Wolf's lair awaited within fog-shrouded islands, and beyond that storms gather perhaps bigger than any since Night King. Yet he sensed unbroken thread, linking every soul he left behind. The unknown horizon no longer spelled exile. It beckoned as ground where story continued. one line following another, even if blood must ink the parchment. Day melted into relentless gray sea monotony. Gulls riding wind. On third dawn, a black-hulled schooner shadowed them. Tense moment, friend or foe? Flag raised, gray direwolf on white over Scanai's script. Val narrowed eyes, Tormund gripped axe. Schooner kept distance, turning away. Scouts, perhaps. Jon ordered sails trimmed, course adjusted to rocky shoals where bigger ship risked hull. Clever navigation gleaned from maester charts and white shard expedition. They anchored by Pebble Beach, ringed by basalt cliffs. All disembark. Path wound up through kelp-slick boulders into pine forest, thick with lichen. Durham led, clearing fallen logs. Atop cliffs sat abandoned watchpost, timbers rotted. Carved into stone gate, clawed wolf devouring sun. Jon traced groove, cold. They advanced inland, senses sharp. Night fell quick, camp built in clearing smelling of resin. Ghost-prowled perimeter, Tormund snored. Jon and Val spoke quietly. If Night Wolf commanded ice magic, how counter? Jon still felt cold bite of black sword scratch. Val suggested forging hearts of sungrass. Legendary plant said to warm blood, crazy myth. They laughed softly at absurdity, find courage in shared doubt. In morning, they followed smoke plume to village. Shacks of driftwood, smell of tar. No children, only armed men in piecemeal armor, filed teeth. Leader emerged, scar across forehead shaped lightning, eyes dark. Parley tense. Jon offered trade. Mention of Night Wolf stiffened them. They spat curses, feared Overlord but hated him. Over ale they whispered. Fenrock's stronghold lies in hollowed iceberg fortress chained to coast. He commands packs of direwolves, bred monstrous, and swordmasters sworn by blood oath called moonbiters. They said rebels plotted but lacked spark. Jon realized their arrival could ignite revolt. That night, rebels guided them by kayak through ice channels glowing blue. Fog thick as wool parted, revealing apparition. Towering iceberg carved into snarling wolf head, ramparts of frozen spires, torches flickering along jaws like fiery teeth. Chains moored it to basalt pillars, creaking under tide. Jon's breath smoked. Here legend dwelt solid. They infiltrated via sluice tunnel shown by rebels. Chill water waist high, echoing drips. Passage climbed to cavern, lit by ghost flames. Blue-white torches burning rock oil and powdered bone. Guard patrols sparse, arrogance bred laxity. Tormund ambushed too, Durham muffled them. They emerged onto internal courtyard where hundreds of warriors knelt before balcony draped in wolf skull banners. Drum, thunder rumbled. On balcony appeared towering man clad in frost steel mail, cloak of direwolf pelts, hair silver black wild. Fenrock, Doktum Idamjad Shi. He raised arms. Hush fell. In harsh Gagozi dialect he prophesied. Eternal hunt begins. Prey hearts roasted on frost flame. His words echoed mania and charisma. Jon's fingers clenched long claw. He could end war with arrow now, but sight revealed something else. Children in cages behind throne. Hostages fueling rebellion's fear. A shot might unleash slaughter. Patience weighed heavy. Val whispered plan. Free hostages to spark uprising. Rebels moved silently, unlocking cage latches. Durham lifted bars like twigs. Children ushered into tunnel. But one cage door squealed. Guard turned, alarm cry. Courtyard exploded in chaos. Rebels drew blades. Night Wolf soldiers raced. Fenrock roared, leaping. Eyes burning pale, silver identical to Commander Jon slew. He spotted Jon across throng, grin splitting. "Snow heart," he shouted. "Wolf who killed Queen now kneels." He drew black glinting greatsword, twin of prior commanders, but etched more intricately. JON stepped onto stone dais from side arch, meeting Fenrock halfway. Their swords collided, echoing like frozen mountains cracking. Fenrock's strength monstrous. Each blow jarred JON's shoulders, but JON's speed fluid from years sparring water dancers at Bravos, while waiting for ship resupply, plus giant forged drills. He parried, riposted, footwork measured. Around them battle raged. Rebels fought soldiers, giants tore through ranks, children fled down tunnels. Fenrock taunted, "South wolves soft, you heard them. Come taste real winter." JON answered with silence, sword singing. He noticed Fenrock's eyes flicker when Longclaw touched black blade, shockwave of luminous frost. He aimed for that point, repeated, chipping sparkle each time. The black steel began to vibrate, cracks forming spider pattern. Fenrock snarled, pressed berserk flurry. JON feigned stumble, inviting overreach. He pivoted, catching blade in crossguard notch, twisted, shards snapped loose, exposing shimmering core of ice within metal. Blade screamed fracture. JON chopped with short arc, cleaving weapon near hilt. Fenrock roared pain and rage, swung broken stub. JON ducked, thrust under rib cage. Valyrian steel carried through mail links, penetrating heart. Fenrock staggered backward, eyes widening. Frost vapor poured from wound, curling serpentine. He laughed raggedly even as legs buckled. "Hearth will burn black," he whispered, collapsing. Frozen mist coiled upward, dissipating into night air as if freed spirit. Seeing leader fall, soldiers wavered. Rebels surged, driving them to edges of courtyard. Tormund felled their captain with single bare paw blow. Giant Durham toppled Wolf Banner spire, sending shards of ice raining. Remaining forces dropped arms, some kneeling, others fleeing into hidden passages. JON stood panting, gaze on Fenrock's corpse leaking ice crystals. Val joined, touching his arm. "The night wolf sleeps." He nodded, chest hollow with adrenaline crash. Rebels cheered, chants echoing through Iceberg Skull. They dismantled fortress strategically, melting key supports with oil fires, releasing wolves into forest after coaxing with meat, loading confiscated grain and saltfish onto Dawnfire. Hostages escorted aboard. By dawn, Iceberg Fortress groaned, tilting. JON watched from deck as chains snapped, massive ice drifting seaward to melt into memory, taking Fenrock's corpse to depths. Voyage home, laden with refugees, took longer, storms battering. But each dawn, they sailed closer to Hearth, rising behind horizon. They arrived Milk Bay, under swirling snow. Valley's watchfires lit, horns sounding joy. Children raced ashore, giants waded waist-deep to steady gangplank. Reunion tears, laughter. Moot gathered to hear tale. Rebels sought asylum. Clans debated but granted, bound by JON's witness. Newcomers taught shipbuilding, carving runestones of seas. Winter yet lingered, but valley brimmed with new songs. Of Night Wolf's fall, of Hearth triumph. JON placed broken shard of Fenrock's sword into memory grove, beneath names of all lost. Snow fell gentle, covering black metal with purity. Seasons passed. Raiders no longer crossed passes. Trade with Winterfell's stable, letter from Sansa, proclaimed thaw in South politics. Nobles awed by legend of Hearth King. Bran sent Raven, balanced tilts. Continue. JON smiled softly. Years folded, soft. Children grew tall, learning runes and archery. Giants rebuilt Watchtower bigger. Masters recorded valley laws, codified at third grade moot, naming system of rotating keepers after JON's vow, he remaining first among equals. On midsummer dawn of 7th year, Val gave birth to daughter with white streak in dark hair, eyes gray as dawn. They named her Lyra Dawn Wolf. All erupted celebration. One crisp evening, John sat on ridge above valley, daughter asleep against chest, ghost lying guard. He studied sweep of lights, hall, greenhouses, forge sparks, watchfires strung like necklace. Aurora shimmered faint, promising. He realized the kingdom he feared had grown without throne, carved from stories, trust, and shared peril. In place of iron crown, he wore weight of legacy lighter, because spread among many hands. He looked to horizon, whispered thanks to gods old and new, and to ghosts who guided him. Behind, Vala approached, wrapping cloak over both before sitting. They spoke little, just breathed starlit air. Finally she murmured, "Think they'll still call you king after you're gone?" He watched his daughter stir, tiny fist curling. "If they do," he said, "let it remind them a king's first duty is to keep the fire lit." She smiled, resting head on his shoulder. Far below, bells rang gentle to mark changing watch. Within hall, laughter rose, and above, the silent lights danced, carrying tales to still wider skies. The night had lost none of its darkness, but the hearth it surrounded burned so steadily now that even the greatest shadow could not swallow its glow.